Okay, so full disclosure about today's video. I originally planned to make a couple installments of it back in October, but then life happened, and so I never got around to doing it. But then I noticed that more and more people were posting pictures of their finished objects or their works in progress on the discussion threads in Ravelry, so I decided to, at long last, hop in and talk about my decision to participate in the Westknits MKAL this year and how that's been going. Hi, I'm Harriet. Welcome to Musing Maker. This is my channel where I talk about knitting and crochet, which I've been doing for a little over 40 years now. In 2024, I participated in the Westknits Make-Along for the first time, and the project was the Go-Go Dynamo Shawl. And I ultimately decided to quit that process and frog what I had made, and I made actually a whole video about that. So I'll put a link to that in the description box down below. This year, I decided that I wanted to give the Westknits Make-Along another try, mostly because the theme for the knitting intrigued me, right? So the topic was the MusiKAL, and I found it rather kind of interesting to think about how Stephen West might be incorporating motifs that he associates with music into a knitted fabric. So a couple things were different this year in the way that the Westknits Make-Along was hosted, and I actually found them really appealing, right? Because they kind of seem to address a lot of the uneasiness I had felt during the Go-Go Dynamo shawl, which was kind of not really being able to anticipate a little bit of what the finished project was going to look like. Now, you could say that that is actually the whole point of a mystery knit-along, is that you're supposed to just kind of knit along and not want or need to know what the finished project will look like, but I found that I personally wasn't fully comfortable with that, particularly if I felt like I couldn't see far enough ahead to know how to sort of plan out my time for working on the project. So this year's knit-along, like previous year's knit-alongs, had 4 clues, and they dropped every Wednesday in October, or every Thursday in October, rather. But what they did differently this year was they also dropped a separate file, very clearly marked spoiler for clue 1, 2, 3, and 4, so that if you wanted to, you could go in and look and see what each clue was going to look like, without having to kind of knit it to figure out what it was going to look like. And for me, I liked this a lot, and I thought it was a really good compromise, because some people, yes, they just want the full mystery. And some of us kind of want the mystery for a little while, but then once we start knitting, we like a bit more of a clearer direction. And so what I found particularly helpful about this year with the spoiler photographs was that it did enable me to kind of visualize the final product and recognize that, yes, I'd made some good choices about the colors that I had decided to use, and it just kind of helped me want to create the finished project. That's where I am right now. I am sort of still in the thick of working on the finished project. I am about halfway through clue 3, so I have to finish clue 3 and then work on clue 4. But I thought I'd talk a little bit about, what my experience has been thus far, since I'm about a little over halfway through the project, and yeah, what I'm looking forward to as I kind of contemplate finishing it. Okay, so for the yarns that I chose, I generally, when I do a Westknits Make-Along, I don't buy yarn specifically for the project. I use yarn that I have in stash. And I have a lot of Holstgarn Coast, which is a wool cotton blend, fingering weight wool cotton blend. And so I decided that that's what I wanted to use for my Westknits Make-Along. And kind of keeping with the musical theme of the knit-along, I said I would be knitting the blues with a little bit of green thrown in there. So the 4 colors that I chose and this is again Holstgarn Coast, which is a wool cotton blend, I chose California Blue for color A, Color B, I chose a blue that I really love called Cobalt. It's this beautiful bright blue. Color C is a kind of greenish with maybe some slight blue flecks in it called Ivanhoe. And color D is Duck Egg. Okay, so that's that beautiful light blue. So once I had those 4 colors chosen, I was ready to embark on the project. So you've probably, if you've watched other videos, a lot of people have probably told you that clue 1 was a bit of a challenge. And I would agree with that. So this is clue 1. I'll also put footage up on the screen because it might show up a little better than me holding it up like this, right? But basically, these little, like kind of sound wave looking motifs are clue 1. And so the assembly on it was kind of interesting, right? Because you didn't just sort of assemble them all in a row, right? You started with this first motif and then you kind of built up along the side of it and then you sort of filled in on the other sides. And so there was a lot of counting stitches, picking things up, putting things on hold. So it was a pretty labor intensive clue. And I think in my Ravelry notes, I described motif number 5 of this, right? Because there were 6 of these that you had to do. And so the first 3 for me went very quickly, and then motif 4 slowed down, and then motif 5 felt like quite a slog. But at that point I knew, because I had seen ahead by looking at the spoiler pictures, what the finished clue was going to look like, and I knew that I was going to like it, and I knew my colors were working well, and so that carried me through working through motif number 6, but yes, I was thrilled when it was over. So a couple of things I decided to do. So with many Stephen West knit-alongs, he incorporates what he calls a mohair dare, where you can incorporate mohair. He often likes to put brioche into his projects as well. And so for this, clue 1 was no exception, but he also gave this option to do just garter stitch ridges if you didn't want to do the brioche, and you didn't have to include the mohair. So I decided that I actually liked the way both the garter stitch motifs and the brioche motifs looked, and that I wanted both of them, right? I wanted the best of both worlds in my clue 1. And I got this from somebody on Ravelry, so this wasn't like my unique idea or anything. And so I did both types. So the first motif here I did with a garter stitch ridge. So this one has just the garter stitch ridge on it. And it definitely went a lot more quickly than the brioche. But for the next row of motifs, you'll see here, I did brioche. And I also incorporated some mohair in that as well, right? So there's some mohair being held. I held the blue mohair with color A, and I held the green mohair with the Ivanhoe, which was the only green color that I had. One of the things that, you know, kind of maybe made the motifs a little slower is that you also had, this was the year of sort of these ridges, right? So I had I had previously done them on my Ooey Gooey sweater, and so here they are in the Westknits MKAL as well. And because I had done them on the Ooey Gooey sweater, I knew kind of how to do them. They were much harder and went more slowly, I think, on using a fingering weight yarn than they did on the Ooey Gooey sweater. But yeah, I really like that the way that they look. So then it was on to clue 2, and people who were out ahead of me on it talked about how much faster and easier clue 2 was. And so I'm going to hold it up so you can see clue 2. Right, so it's this, let's see if I can show it, right? This ripple through here. And I will agree that that did go much more quickly in general. Because it did for me, I also found it a little less interesting. But I liked the way it looked. And once again, I was one of the people who went to the spoilers to look and see what we would be getting. So then here we are. Now I started clue 3. And I know that a lot of people did not like clue 3. It is sort of this look. Right, so it sort of has it has a kind of harlequin sort of pattern to it. And when I read, Stephen West in his description talks about how in some ways it's almost like piano keys, right? That kind of, that square sort of look to it. That was where I really, for me, I've really gotten bogged down in finishing that. I did finish this a couple weeks ago, and then I did have to get back to, or get to some gift knitting, so I haven't picked it up. So the next section that I'm sort of need to finish on Clue 3 are the slip stitches. And so I know what that's going to look like. I also know what Clue 4 is going to look like, right? It's going to return to the full edge of the shawl, and then I have to figure out whether I want to do brioche for that portion as well. I sort of think I do. I think it will look nicer. So for 2026, in the first couple of months, I really would like to, I definitely want to get this shawl in particular finished because I think it's a really beautiful shawl and I'd just like to get it done. I will definitely be posting on my progress and a finished object, that's the plan, in early 2026 for this particular project. So if you're curious, please subscribe and come back again, and I hope to see you back here again soon. Thank you for watching.